All right, here's an expanded S800-word segment for key point 1S, written in a seamless, conversational, speech-like style, in the tone of someone like Matthew Hussey delivering it live. You've probably been in that strange place where you can feel, without a doubt, that someone wants you. You sense it in the way they look at you, the way they linger just a little longer in your presence, or how their voice shifts when they talk to you compared to everyone else. You know it's there. The attraction, the pull, the spark. And yet, for some reason, he doesn't chase you. He doesn't take that step you're expecting, the one that would confirm everything you already feel, and that leaves you in a paradox. He wants you, but he doesn't pursue you. Now, that's where the silent struggle begins, because when you're on the receiving end of that, your mind starts racing. You think, if he likes me, why isn't he doing anything about it? If he wants me, why doesn't he show it in the way I need him to? It's a confusing space because it goes against the simple narrative we're often told. If a man wants you, he'll come after you, right? If he doesn't chase, then he must not want it enough. But life and love are rarely that black and white. What's happening here is a contradiction between internal feelings and external actions. Internally, he may absolutely feel something. It's not in your head. That attraction can be very real. But externally, his actions, or lack of them, send a completely different message. And human beings, by nature, trust actions far more than words or feelings. So when the action isn't there, it undermines what we sense in his energy. That's why it's so frustrating. Imagine for a second you're at a restaurant. You order food, and you can smell it cooking in the kitchen. You know it's being prepared. You can even hear the clattering of pots and pans, the sizzling on the grill. You're certain it's there, but it never actually comes to your table. After a while, no matter how good that meal smells, it doesn't matter. You're still sitting there hungry, and you start wondering if you made the wrong choice coming to that restaurant at all. That's exactly what this feels like. You can smell the attraction, but you're not being served any action. And when someone isn't chasing, you start making dangerous assumptions. You think maybe you're not enough, maybe you did something wrong, maybe you should be doing more to get his attention. But often, it's not about you at all. It's about that gap between what he feels and what he's willing or able to do about it. That's why I call it a paradox. It's two truths existing at the same time. He wants you, and yet he doesn't move toward you. Now, the important thing to recognize here is that wanting someone is passive. It costs nothing to feel desire. Desire sits in the background. Action, however, that's where investment begins. Chasing, pursuing, showing up for you, those are the things that require effort, vulnerability, even courage. And for a lot of men, that's where the breakdown happens. It's not that he doesn't want you, it's that the leap from wanting to doing is where fear, hesitation, or ego gets in the way. So in this first part of our conversation, I want you to see clearly that you're not imagining things. Yes, it's possible for a man to truly be interested and still not pursue. It doesn't mean you aren't desirable. It doesn't mean you aren't worthy of being chased. It simply means there's a disconnect between what he feels and what he shows. And living in that disconnect is where so many women get stuck. Because it feels hopeful enough to keep you holding on, but uncertain enough to keep you questioning yourself. That's why I call it a silent struggle. You're not arguing with him about it. You're not having big fights over it. But inside, you're wrestling with this constant question. What does it mean? If he wants me, why doesn't he act like it? And that quiet internal conflict can be one of the most exhausting experiences in dating. Here's the truth: you need to walk away with attraction without pursuit isn't enough. It's like potential energy. It's there, but it does nothing for you until it's put into motion. You deserve more than silent longing. You deserve someone who shows up, who takes that step, who doesn't leave you guessing whether his feelings will ever translate into action. Because if you stay too long in the paradox, you risk confusing his passivity for mystery, or even mistaking his hesitation for depth. And that's when you end up waiting for someone who never really arrives. So the paradox of desire without pursuit isn't just about him. It's about you recognizing what you will and won't tolerate. It's about seeing clearly that while someone may want you, it's only the ones who act on it that can actually build something with you. And until you accept that, or you'll always be caught in the loop of trying to interpret signals instead of experiencing commitment. That's the first piece of this silent struggle, understanding that yes, he may want you, but wanting you without the chase, without the action, without the effort, simply isn't enough. Would you like me to expand key point 2 in the same style and length face, so the speech flows as one cohesive talk? All right, here's the 800-word expansion for key point 2s, written in the same seamless conversational Lev speech style. 2. When we look a little deeper at why this paradox happens, why a man can want you but still not chase you, we begin to see that it's not always as simple as a lack of interest. Often, it's about what's going on underneath the surface, the root causes of his hesitation. And this is where a lot of women start to get lost, because instead of seeing it for what it is, they internalize it. They think, if he's not moving toward me, then I must not be worth the effort. But in reality, his hesitation is usually about him, not about you. Let's talk about one of the biggest culprits: fear of rejection. Now, you might think, come on, men are supposed to be confident, bold, the ones who go after what they want. But the truth is, rejection stings just as much for them as it does for anyone else. And for some men, the fear of hearing no outweighs the desire to go after a yes. They'll sit on their feelings, hoping you'll make the first move, because then they never risk having their ego bruised. They get to keep their attraction safe inside without exposing it to the possibility of loss. Then there are men who carry the scars of past heartbreak. If they've been burned before, if they put their heart out there once and got crushed, they can become cautious, sometimes overly cautious. It's almost like their past experiences have taught them that chasing leads to pain. So instead of putting themselves out there again, they retreat. They tell themselves, if she really wants me, she'll make it clear. I don't have to take that risk. And suddenly, you're dealing with someone who feels something strong for you, but is too busy protecting himself to act on it. There's also ego, and this one is tricky. Some men, quite frankly, don't want to put themselves in a position where they could be perceived as vulnerable. They've been conditioned to believe that the one who chases holds less power, so they play it cool. They think, if I wait long enough, maybe she'll chase me. Maybe she'll prove her interest first, so I don't have to. It's not always about arrogance. It's often about insecurity hiding behind pride. But either way, the result is the same: the absence of pursuit. And let's not forget cultural or social conditioning. For some men, the messages they've absorbed about relationships are confusing at best. They've been told that being too eager is unattractive, that showing too much interest makes them look desperate. So they hold back, believing that restraint is more appealing. Ironically, they may genuinely want you, but they think showing too much of that desire is the very thing that would push you away. All of these reasons, fear, heartbreak, ego conditioning, they create a kind of paralysis. And when you're on the receiving end of that paralysis, you feel like you're in limbo because he's giving you enough energy to make you believe he cares, but not enough action to make you feel secure. And here's the danger. If you don't understand these root causes, you start filling in the blanks yourself. You start thinking you're the problem, when really the problem is his hesitation, not your worth. Now, I'm not saying this to excuse the behavior. Just because a man is afraid of rejection or scarred from his past doesn't mean you should accept being left in a state of uncertainty. But understanding why it happens gives you clarity, and clarity is power. When you see his hesitation for what it is, you stop making it about you. You stop contorting yourself to earn his pursuit. And instead you start asking, is this someone who's capable of stepping up or not? Here's the key distinction: interest without action is incomplete. Yes, he may want you. Yes, his hesitation may be rooted in something real and human. But the bottom line is, until he's willing to move past that fear, that pride, or that conditioning, you'll always be left carrying the weight of his inaction. And that's not a burden you should have to carry. So when you're faced with a man who wants you but doesn't chase you, I want you to remember this: his hesitation is about him. It's about his fear, his ego, his conditioning, his past. It is not a reflection of your beauty, your value, or your worthiness of love, because someone else will come along who has those same fears, the same insecurities, the same scars, but will still decide that you're worth the risk of chasing anyway. And that's the difference between someone who wants you in theory and someone who wants you in reality. Would you like me to continue building key point 3 into the next 800-word segment so the full speech keeps its flow? Here's the Wes 800-word expansion for key point 3, written in the same smooth, conversational, live speech style. 2. When we step back and look at how modern dating works today, we start to understand why this whole dynamic of wanting someone but not chasing them has become so common. Dating has changed. The rules that might have seemed clearer years ago don't quite apply in the same way anymore. And the result is that a lot of people, men especially, feel caught between what they're supposed to do and what they're afraid of doing. Think about the messages we've all absorbed from culture, movies, even advice floating around on social media. On one hand, we hear, if a man wants you, he'll chase you. On the other hand, we hear, don't look desperate. Don't try too hard. Don't show all your cards. So what happens? Many men find themselves hesitating, not because they don't feel the attraction, but because they've been convinced that if they reveal too much interest too soon, they'll lose the very thing they're trying to gain. There's a whole culture now of playing it cool. People believe that if they keep their distance, it creates intrigue, that mystery somehow translates into value. And while a little mystery can be exciting, it often goes too far. Instead of sparking curiosity, it creates confusion. Instead of showing strength, it reads as indifference. And so we get this strange game where two people may want each other deeply, but both are holding back because neither wants to look like they're trying harder than the other. Technology has made this even more complicated. Dating apps and social media have given us endless options. There's this illusion of abundance, like there's always someone else just one swipe away. And with that illusion comes a shift in behavior. Instead of committing energy toward pursuing one person, many people adopt a more passive approach, waiting to see who chases them, who makes the effort, who does the work first. It's a way of protecting themselves from rejection, but it also dilutes the intensity of real pursuit. Another layer to this is the changing expectations of gender roles. Decades ago, the script was clear: men pursued, women responded. Today, that script is far more fluid. Women are encouraged to go after what they want, which is a positive shift. But for some men, this creates uncertainty. They wonder, should I chase? Should I wait? Should I let her make the move? And that hesitation can look like disinterest when, in reality, it's just confusion about what role they're supposed to play. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In trying to avoid rejection, in trying not to appear desperate, in trying to navigate all these unwritten rules, men sometimes convince themselves that not chasing is actually the attractive option. They rationalize their inaction as strategy. They think, if I just hang back, she'll wonder about me. She'll be curious. She'll come to me. And maybe that works for a short while, but eventually it leaves the other person feeling undervalued and unseen. Because while mystery may grab attention in the beginning, consistency is what builds connection. The problem with these modern dynamics is that they create a cycle of half measures. Instead of bold pursuit, you get breadcrumbing, small gestures of interest that never add up to real commitment. Instead of vulnerability, you get calculated restraint. And instead of clarity, you get mixed signals. It's no wonder so many people are exhausted by dating today. They're stuck in this space where everyone seems to want love, but very few are willing to fully show up for it. So, when you meet a man who wants you, but doesn't chase you, part of what you're seeing is the influence of these cultural shifts. He's been taught, sometimes directly, sometimes subconsciously, that chasing might hurt his chances, that holding back is safer, that being too much is worse than not being enough. And that conditioning shapes the way he behaves, even when his feelings are real. But here's the truth: love doesn't thrive in passivity. Connection isn't built on hesitation. And while the modern world may encourage games of restraint, real relationships require courage. They require someone being willing to take the risk of looking a little vulnerable, a little eager, a little exposed. Because without that, all you have is two people sitting on opposite sides of the room, waiting for the other to make a move. So yes, modern dating dynamics have changed the way people approach pursuit. They've introduced new layers of complexity, new fears, new strategies. But at the end of the day, the principle remains the same: desire without action isn't enough. And no matter how much society changes, no matter how many new rules we try to invent, that simple truth doesn't go away. Which is why, if you find yourself in that situation, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play into the culture of hesitation. Because while he might be stuck in it, you don't have to be. You get to decide that mixed signals and half effort aren't good enough for you. You get to demand clarity, consistency, and courage. Because the person who is right for you will never let the culture of playing it cool be more important than showing you how much you mean to them. Would you like me to go ahead and expand key point 4 as next, keeping the same rhythm and flow so the whole speech builds naturally? Here's the 800-word expansion for key point force, written in the same seamless, conversational, live speech style. One of the most important things to understand in this whole dynamic is that just because a man isn't chasing you doesn't mean he isn't showing his interest at all. Very often, when someone wants you but doesn't take bold action, what slips through are these small, subtle signals. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss them. But if you are paying attention, sometimes they're enough to keep you holding on, even when you're not getting what you really need. Think about the way he engages with you. He might not be pursuing you in an obvious way, asking you out regularly, planning dates, showing consistent effort, but maybe you notice that he lights up in conversation. His tone changes when it's you he's speaking to. Maybe he asks about small details in your life and remembers them later. Those are silent signals. They're not pursuit, but they are proof of interest. Or notice the way he positions himself when you're around. It might not be as overt as walking across the room to declare his feelings, but maybe he always seems to gravitate toward your space. Maybe he finds little excuses to be nearby, to stand close, to make eye contact. These are micro behaviors that give him away. Even when someone is holding back from chasing, their body language can tell a different story. There are also protective gestures that come through. A guy who wants you, even if he's not chasing, may show subtle signs of care. It could be something small, like making sure you get home safely, checking in on you when you're sick, or stepping in to help when you're struggling with something. These actions may not be grand declarations of love, but they're expressions of quiet investment. They reveal that he's tuned into you in ways he isn't with other people. Another silent signal is consistency in availability. He may not be initiating big moves, but maybe he always responds when you reach out. He answers your messages. He takes your calls. He's present when you need him. To you, it feels like if he didn't care, he wouldn't be so available. And you're right. Availability is often a sign of desire. The problem is that it's a passive form of desire. It's him showing up when you knock, but never being the one to knock first. These subtle signals can be incredibly powerful because they tap into your intuition. They make you feel seen, noticed, valued, even if only in small ways. And because attraction is often felt more than it's spoken, those little cues can keep you hooked. You start telling yourself, I know he likes me. I can feel it. And you're probably not wrong. But the danger is that these signals can give the illusion of progress where none really exists. It's almost like being given appetizers, but never the main course. You're not starving. You're getting just enough to feel something. But you're not being fully nourished either. And the longer you live off those appetizers, the more you convince yourself that maybe this is enough. That maybe the small signs are proof that he'll eventually make a bigger move. And in the meantime, you wait. But here's what we have to be careful about. Signals don't equal commitment. They don't equal pursuit. A man can look at you a certain way, remember little things about you, even check in on you, and still never step into the space of building a real relationship. Because signals are safe. They allow him to express his feelings without taking the risk that pursuit requires. And if you're not careful, you can end up investing heavily in a man's signals instead of his actions. You start building a whole story in your head about what they mean instead of looking at what he's actually doing to move things forward. That's where people lose time, energy, and confidence because they mistake hints for effort. So yes, pay attention to the silent signals. They're real. They're meaningful. They do tell you that he wants you. But don't let them replace the standard of pursuit. Because signals, on their own, aren't enough to sustain a relationship. They're like shadows of desire, not the substance of it. At the end of the day, what matters is whether those signals ever translate into consistent effort, whether they grow into pursuit, whether they build into something that gives you security and clarity. If they don't, then all you're left with is a man who wants you but doesn't move toward you. And that's not love. That's limbo. Because the truth is, silent signals may show interest, but only action proves intention. Kimoto, would you like me to continue into S key point fef next, expanding it into another 800-word segment to keep the speech flowing as one unified talk? Here's the ZSA 800 word expansion for key point 5s myself, written in the same flowing conversational speech style too. Now, let's talk about what happens to you when you're on the receiving end of this. Because this whole situation isn't just confusing, it takes a real emotional toll. And often, that toll is invisible to everyone else. You carry it quietly, while on the surface it looks like everything is fine. But inside, it can feel like a constant tug of war with yourself. When you know deep down that someone wants you, but they're not pursuing you, it creates this ongoing state of uncertainty. And uncertainty is exhausting. Your mind doesn't rest because it's always busy trying to decode what's really happening. You replay conversations in your head. You analyze text messages, tone of voice, eye contact, little gestures. Anything that might help you figure out, does he actually care about me, or am I imagining it? That second guessing drains you, not just mentally, but emotionally too. Over time, this can start to chip away at your confidence. You begin to ask questions you shouldn't be asking yourself. Am I not enough? Am I doing something wrong? Am I expecting too much? And every time you don't get the pursuit you deserve, you feel the sting of those doubts a little deeper. It's not just about him not making a move. It's about the way that lack of action makes you turn on yourself. And here's the hardest part when you're in that space. It can feel almost addictive because he's giving you just enough to keep you there. The small signals, the subtle gestures, the moments of attention, they keep you invested. And because you've felt those sparks of connection, you don't want to let go. You think, if I can just hold on a little longer, maybe he'll finally step up. But that waiting period can stretch out for weeks, months, even years. And the longer it goes on, the more it eats away at your peace of mind. It's not just about your confidence either. It's about your energy. Think about how much mental space gets consumed by this dynamic. The time you spend wondering about him, questioning yourself, interpreting signals, waiting for clarity. That's energy that could be going into your passions, your friendships, your goals, your joy. Instead, it gets tied up in this endless cycle of, does he or doesn't he? And that's what makes it such a struggle. It doesn't just affect your dating life. It bleeds into the way you feel about yourself in every area. This dynamic also creates a kind of emotional limbo. You're not fully with him, but you're not fully free either. You can't move forward with him, but you also find it hard to move on from him. You're caught in between, and that in-between place is one of the most painful places to live, because it feels like you're stuck waiting for someone else to make a decision about your life. And here's the truth. When you're waiting on someone who isn't pursuing you, you're unintentionally putting yourself in a position where their hesitation defines your happiness. You've given the steering wheel of your emotions to someone who isn't even driving. And that's why it feels so heavy, because your peace of mind is now tied to someone else's indecision. But I want you to notice something important here. The pain isn't just about his lack of pursuit. The deeper pain is the way you start to question your own value because of it. It's the internal dialogue that says, if I were really worth it, he'd be chasing me. And that's the part that can be so damaging because it turns his behavior into your identity. It makes his lack of effort feel like a reflection of who you are, instead of what it really is, a reflection of who he is and where he's at. So yes, it's frustrating when someone wants you but doesn't chase you. But the real struggle is the way it leaves you doubting yourself, waiting in limbo, drained of energy and robbed of clarity. That's the emotional toll. And that's why it's so important to recognize this pattern for what it is. because once you name it, once you see it clearly, you can stop letting it quietly erode your confidence and start taking your power back. Because the bottom line is, love shouldn't feel like waiting in the dark for someone to choose you. Would you like me to move into key point 6 next and expand it into the final 800 word segment so the whole speech feels complete and ready to deliver? Here's the 1800 word expansion for key point 6ef, crafted in the same natural speech-like flow. The most powerful shift happens when you stop making his lack of pursuit the story of your worth, and instead you use it as a mirror to decide what you want and what you will accept. Because here's the reality: you can't control whether someone finds the courage to step up. You can't force someone to chase you, to show up for you, to invest in you. What you can control is how you respond to the ambiguity and whether you allow yourself to stay in it. When you realize that desire without pursuit is never enough, you begin to draw a line in the sand for yourself. You stop looking at mixed signals as potential, and you start looking at them as what they really are: uncertainty. And uncertainty is not a foundation for love. The foundation for love is clarity. It's someone showing you with consistency, I see you, I want you, and I'm willing to do what it takes to be with you. Without that, you're always left carrying the emotional burden of guessing, and you deserve more than a relationship built on guesses. What empowerment looks like in this situation is choosing to value your peace over his hesitation. It's reminding yourself that just because someone wants you doesn't mean they're the right person for you. Wanting is easy. Anyone can want. Action, commitment, pursuit. That's what separates someone who is simply drawn to you from someone who is ready to build with you. And when you choose to hold that standard, you protect yourself from the silent struggle of waiting in limbo. Part of empowerment is also recognizing that incompatibility doesn't always mean dislike or disinterest. Sometimes it's simply a mismatch in timing, readiness, or courage. You may meet someone who wants you but can't bring themselves to chase you. That doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them the wrong person for you right now. And when you see it that way, it becomes easier to let go, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because what happens when you keep holding on to someone who wants you but won't pursue you is you send yourself a subtle message that this is all you're worth. You condition yourself to accept crumbs instead of the feast. And over time, that lowers the standard you set for yourself, and it becomes harder to recognize when someone truly is showing up for you. That's why empowerment is not just about walking away. It's about redefining what you're available for. It's about saying, I don't just want to be wanted, I want to be chosen. When you start to live from that place, everything changes. You stop waiting for texts that never come. You stop over-analyzing signals. You stop building castles in the air based on someone else's hesitation. Instead, you open yourself up to the kind of love that is clear, confident, and consistent. You give yourself the gift of not wasting time in relationships that go nowhere, and instead you reserve your heart for someone who doesn't just want you, but proves it with action. And I want you to think about how freeing that really is. Imagine what it would feel like to no longer tie your peace of mind to whether or not someone decides to step up. Imagine living in a way where your energy is invested in people who meet you with the same effort, the same clarity, the same commitment you bring. That's not just love. That's partnership. That's where you stop struggling silently and start thriving openly. The beautiful thing about choosing empowerment in these moments is that it doesn't just change your love life. It changes how you see yourself. Because every time you refuse to settle for someone's hesitation, You reaffirm your value to yourself. You teach yourself that you are worthy of more than signals, more than maybes, more than half efforts. And that's the kind of self-respect that radiates out into every part of your life. So when he wants you but doesn't chase you, don't make it a story about your inadequacy. Make it a story about your standard. Let it be the moment you say to yourself, I will not live in limbo. I will not question my worth. I will not confuse desire with commitment. Because when you stand in that truth, you stop chasing answers from him and you start choosing answers for yourself. Because at the end of the day, the love you deserve is not silent, not hesitant, not uncertain. The love you deserve is the kind that shows up out loud and makes it crystal clear that you're not just wanted. You're chosen. Would you like me to now weave all 6 expanded points together into one polished, complete speech, so it flows as a single narrative from start to finish?